We're live. I will do a ping on the Discord server.
Cool. Yeah, just send it to me. I can also help with that.
Thank you. Yeah. Event details, and then I'll do it on the event too, so people who save event. Great. Perfect. So I'll give it a minute for people to find the new link. Sorry about that. And then we can get going. But hello, anyone on YouTube, if they are eventually there. So interesting. Yeah, Liya is grey on YouTube too, which is good. It's great.
Oh, wow.
Let's see if I can change that.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your patience.
Okay, cool. People are slowly trickling in, which is awesome. Oh my word. Okay. Layout. Speaker split screen. Yeah, that's funny, Liya. We can only see your phone one. It's not picking up your video.
Oh,
I'm
no.
gonna hide you. And then
But you do see the video on your side.
I see the video. No one else does. So I'm having a good time myself. Do you want to try rejoining on your laptop? I know we
Yeah,
can
we'll
see.
try.
Sorry. Okay, we've got 7 people in so far. Hey, hey everyone. We're having like crazy issues with Riverside. It's being awful. It's such a good time. I'm glad people are finding it though. It's good.
Okay, still no video now. Now that I'm
Ooh.
joined.
Okay, no, we can see you. So you're now a grey box, so I can't see your video at all, but you have appeared on the live stream, which is good. So if we can get that working, then we'll be good to go. Which is super strange.
I'm not doing anything different when I.
My goodness, Riverside sucks. We can just give up and go to Discord if this doesn't work at all. We'll see.
If we get here, I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to record this and we can always push to Discord. I just need to set up my OBS for that.
Yeah, sure. Oh, all right.
I know.
Okay, let's try again. God doesn't let me leave now.
I won't let you leave.
Yeah, okay.
You're stuck.
Riverside, like UX designers, come on. They're like just copy the products that are out there. Stop reinventing it if you can.
I think this
rule.
is a technical issue. It seems like a much more of a technical issue. Let me see. So, okay, so let's push this over.
Okay, give me 1 second.
Oh, okay.
Join my link. Let's try one more time. Okay.
All right.
Joining now.
Yeah.
Video.
Okay.
Nice.
Share.
Oh my word. Sweet.
Okay, cool.
Okay, let's try.
Amazing.
Share.
Fantastic.
Okay, how are we doing on the stream? Do we see the presentation?
Let's get going. Yeah, we can see. So, okay, hang on. Let me check. I'll wait for it to. Yes, we can see your presentation. We can see you. We can hear you. We'll get going. Okay, cool. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the first talk this year at Mainly Human Design. Sorry for all the tech issues, but we're here now. We're good. We're getting going. Super excited for this talk with Liya. Liya is a designer at Google. She's been working on AndroidXR and some really cool stuff. She's going to talk about XR onboarding, which I am super hyped for. XR onboarding is such an important topic because basically no one on the planet has used XR comparatively, and everyone needs to be taught how to use it. It's such a new technology, and so I'm really excited to hear some insights from Liya. Yes, so that'd be great. Liya, do you want to get going?
Hold on, it says camera disconnect. Are we good? Do you see me
I can still
still?
see
Do you
you.
see everything? Okay, I'll just ignore the notification.
Okay,
Hi, everyone. All right, we good?
we're good. Let's get going.
Okay,
Thanks
perfect.
so much.
Let's get going. No problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Liya Safina. I am a freelance designer at Google, and I have been an independent designer for the last decade, which is really exciting because I think there is a really interesting shift in the workforce to have more people stay independent while working with bigger companies with bigger products, and you don't necessarily always have to go in-house. And I'm the proof that you can do it for over 8 years, and you can work on a lot of really, really cool stuff. So, to everybody who is pondering their career, pondering what to do next, I just want to say that finding a full-time job is, of course, driven with security, but you can still do a lot of really cool stuff freelance. That's a little intro. But so to give you a little bit more of my background and what I'm going to be talking about, I want to start with a little bit more of a framing that I do not normally position myself as an XR designer, even though I do XR design. The way that I talk about my skill set and my specific niche is innovation design. And while it might seem fairly broad, it is a very, very particular arc, which requires me to be fairly well versed in every single new technology that comes out there. So the way that I talk about what I do is I say companies invite me to figure out the UX or UI of their product when there are no best practices in place. When you cannot just go and copy from somewhere else. You cannot just go and follow a particular guideline. You have to figure out the product from scratch. And over my career, I've been tackling such industries as e-commerce. Of course, I worked on the Nike e-commerce app. I also worked on Alibaba e-commerce app, and you can imagine that Eastern UX is completely different from Western UX, which is really, really interesting for when you're trying to marry both in one app and cater both audiences at the same time. I worked on a lot of blockchain products as well, including Coinbase Pro, which was terrifying. So I had to learn all the Bloomberg terminals and how the traders on Wall Street work and how does this apply to crypto. I worked on a product before Coinbase actually acquired it. It was called an app. An app was called To Go Me, and then Coinbase acquired it and turned it into Coinbase Pro, which is really interesting. And so, of course, there are a lot of other things here. I worked on 2 dating apps, Bumble and Hinge, which is really, really fun. Even though, ironically, I met my partner on Tinder. Go figure. Did I do my job well enough? And additionally, before we switch into the XR fields, specifically as a focus of this talk, one of the best projects of my career was working on the new city that Toyota is building in Japan. So what they did is they actually decided to convert one of their large factories right by Mount Fuji into a city for people. And in that city, it's not only the self-driving cars and autonomous technology, it's also all the types of robotics and AI and smart homes that you can imagine, which is a very, very ambitious project. They are actually opening the first phase of this city this year, but you can imagine as a UX designer, it was a really, really tough job, not only because you're designing for services for something that is not yet built, but you're also designing for Eastern and Western audience at the same time, because there's, of course, a lot of Japanese Toyota employees that are going to live there, but also a lot of researchers and partners from the rest of the world. You're designing for the end user of all of these technologies, but you're also designing the dashboards for people who are monitoring all these robots and self-driving fleets and trying to catch, if something's broken or congested, etc. So this is all in all to say that being an innovation designer is a hard to define job. It's a hard to define niche, but that's something that I really enjoy and something that I built my career around. And very serendipitously in the last few years, I've been invited to work on a lot of AR, VR projects, and this is how I find myself here. I did want to show a really quick video of the Toyota City, just so you guys get an idea. Like, I think it's a very intriguing project. I think it's like super interesting to take a look at it. I don't think we have sound, so I'll just voice it over. So this is an idea of a traditional city where you have all the mobility side by side. For Woven City, they're separating where the self-driving cars are going to go, where the personal mobility like bikes and scooters are going to go, and when the pedestrians are going to go. And they're weaving all of this into this new fabric of the city where, because self-driving cars rely heavily on sensors, right? You can guarantee increased security for pedestrians, and you can weave it all together in different ways beyond what normally the cities do, right? And I think Toyota is one of the best companies that I've ever worked in terms of how much they respect people and how much they just really pay attention to security, to privacy. They are not saying that, hey, we need technology everywhere. We're saying if you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. So this is just a quick preview for anybody who's curious to take a look at it. There's a lot of materials out there. There was an XR part of this project as well, but I'm not going to be focusing on it today. So this is just kind of out of curiosity, a quick teaser for all of you. All right, so the first ever project I worked on in the AR space was this amazing app called Altoida. And Altoida is an app that is kind of mostly focused in the medical field, and it's designed for early Alzheimer's detection. We know that Alzheimer's and just brain disease is like one of the hugest threats, especially for aging population, for anybody over 50. And I was really shocked when I learned that till now, doctors are still kind of trying to catch the disease through pen and paper tests. And what Altoida does is that it takes an app that you can download on your phone, or you can download it on your tablet. And the tablet, you know, is like very often a tool that's preferred by people over 50, just because everything is larger and you can like set up larger fonts. And then you take a few really interesting gamified tests that measure over 20 different biomarkers in your brain. The tremor, the processing speed, the kind of immediate memory, long-term memory, et cetera, et cetera. And so right now I'm sharing a few onboarding screens that we designed to really focus on this audience. This is not, you know, a millennial, not a Gen Z audience. It's mostly a little bit people older, who are older, right? So you need to really make sure that you're clear, that you're setting the priorities, that you're setting the expectations, especially as we get to the AR part of the app. So this is before we get to the AR part, we're really kind of setting some of the preferences. We have some non-AR, non-gamified tasks that you need to do just so we can set the benchmark and baseline. But once you get into the AR part, it is really fun. So people can move around their house, they can place different objects, and then they can memorize where they place them, and then they are retrieving them. There's a situation of a simulated fire in your house, which is maybe not as fun, but adds a little bit of additional pressure and context for you to perform tasks. And like, okay, if there was a fire, what would you grab first? Where did you place this? And some other tasks. So we really, as we were tackling this, we were thinking a lot about how do we set the expectations? How do we show, you know, how many steps is left? We also, these screens don't show it, but we also kind of talk a lot about how much time do you have to button for something. Like this exercise will take 3 minutes. This exercise will take 2 minutes. So that was really, really fun. And just going back to the slide that I showed before, these are some of the really interesting additional features that we were exploring. So beyond just, what is the word I'm looking for? Detection of the symptoms, we were also thinking about ways to educate people on their brain, right? And so as a way to visualize this, I came up with an idea of this filter where you can kind of just take your brain out of your head and you can tap on different areas and learn about your brain activity and see how this maps to the task that you performed, and just kind of learn by seeing, learn by doing, learn by like actually putting everything into context. So that was my first kind of foray into the AR field, which is really interesting. And this is an example, just so you know, because you're sending your results to the doctor. Again, this was a really, really interesting task where you kind of have two user groups in mind. You have the doctors who receive the reports, and you have the patients that need to access the reports. And fun fact, I really, really believe in cross-pollination overall in terms of innovation. I think that, you know, you can take some features from one field and apply them to the other field. So the little trackers of your brain activity here were actually inspired by financial trading apps. So like however you'll see stocks perform on Robinhood, you know, or anything else. So we kind of took that and applied that to the brain health, which was really, really fun. And is a very practical example of cross-pollination. So as we'll get more into the onboarding for XR, let me set the stage a little bit more for what I'm doing for Google and how to kind of frame the insights that I'm going to show you in a second. So a little over a year ago, Google reached out to me on a very, very secret project, didn't tell me anything. The whole time I was interviewing, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I was going to be doing something in the AR/VR field, right? Now, finally, I can talk a little bit more about it, which makes me really happy. But as they have announced in December, they are coming up with 3 really interesting, distinct aspects for the field, right? So number 1 is the headset that is announced for this year. Number 2 are the glasses for the release date. There's no specific release date quite yet, but I think one of the most exciting aspects is the operating system, the AndroidXR operating system. And the reason why it's so exciting is that it's not only designed for Google products, but it's actually designed for every single company and startup that are operating in the XR world to use. So the same way that you can have Android installed not only on Google Pixel phones, on all the different phones, except for iPhone, is the same way that people are going to be able to use Android XR on different headsets. I am specifically focusing on a few apps that I'm a huge fan of Google Maps. Personally, I'm a super user of Google Maps as well. And so I'm very happy to, again, be able to share finally. I wasn't able to talk about it for a while, that I'm working on Google Maps XR. And I'm also working on Google TV. The interesting thing about Google TV is that media streaming and just movie watching is one of the hero cases for XR. This is one of the top reasons that people who purchased Apple Vision Pro and just wanted to return it but decided not to return it is because of how much they loved watching movies. And so that was a really, really interesting use case for us. And of course, when you're designing the apps, as people have shared, we need to think about onboarding. It's not always going to be a tech-savvy person. It's not always going to be a person who's switching from one headset to another headset. It could be a completely novice user. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share a few principles and a few insights that we learned from research, talk about them, and then I cannot show what I'm working on right now, but I want to show a few examples from previous products that we're using as baseline as well and discuss how that is applied there. Also, if there's a little bit of a noise, I'm sorry. I'm dialing in from South by Southwest. There it was impossible to find a quiet spot, so hopefully you guys can hear me okay, and I'll hear you during our Q&A. I'm trying to get to the noise canceling. All right, so a few principles, insights, rooted in research, rooted in a lot of amazing work of our user testing team, user research team that I'm happy to share with you today as you're thinking about your own product, as you're thinking about designing onboarding for any XR experience. Here are a couple of principles that are universally true that should help any learning process, any designing process that you are going through. So number 1, onboarding can be really beautiful, but if you're making it skippable, and making it skippable is a best practice, we can expect up to 1/3 of the users to skip it. And it's okay, and this is something that we should be designing for, right? If we know that the users are going to skip it, we still need to have a backup plan via tooltips or something else that will help them still understand the features even though they're not going through like a lengthy onboarding process. So the reason people skip, number 1, many prefer to figure out UI for themselves, and they might just feel impatient to start. They're just in the skip mode. They might not even be reading it. Number 2, sometimes experienced users may feel like tutorials are for novices only, and they're like, oh, I know everything, maybe I'm not going to read it. And then some might skip by mistake. And we need to be very forgiving, and we need to design the onboarding in such a way that you can really easily return to it if you skip by mistake. Number 2, User overwhelm during onboarding out of the box experience, UBI is the abbreviation for that, is way more common than expected. So you think, you might be thinking as an XR designer, like, oh, it's very clear, it's fairly minimal, but you should always check in with people because even minimal onboarding could feel very, very overwhelming. So to give you a little bit more context, new XR users might need a moment to take in their environment before they can pay attention to instructions. So maybe give them a breather, maybe load things slower, maybe design it in a way that things appear gradually, right? Just so they can gather their bearings and orient themselves a little bit more. With multiple modalities presenting different information to users, it can be hard to process all of them at the same time. What do I mean by modalities? Because people have different learning styles, you might want to share the instructions on screen, say them out loud, and also write them out. So it will be an illustration, text, and audio. And it's a good practice to kind of support learning through all the different learning styles. But what is important is that it should really match one-to-one. It might be really hard to process if you're writing out one thing and you're saying out loud like a little bit of a lengthier or different way to phrase it. So we need to really pay attention to present the information in a very streamlined way, in the way that everything is very cohesive. And most importantly, XR tutorials should help direct the user's attention. If everything is around you in 360 degrees, you're tempted to look everywhere, right? So we need to highlight the fields that we want to have them look, add a little bit of motion, add a little bit more active color. Just be very forgiving and hold their hand and guide them as we're taking them through the process. Next up, users learn when it's relevant, not before. So this is a really, really interesting thing because especially when your app is complicated, and a lot of the apps I'm working on are fairly complicated. You need to explain 8 different features. You need to segment it out. You need to, and you cannot make it less, just because it's complicated. You really need to chunk it up. So one of the principles that we're following is that do not preemptively tell people something that they're not encountering right now. Show them a relevant task and onboard them to that specific task, right? So just get people invested. If they're not invested, they're not going to learn. Spotlight why a user will benefit from a feature. A good example is just to highlight, like, not just to say, hey, we have this feature, FYI, but first say, like, if you want to get XYZ benefit, this is why you might want to pay attention to this feature, and this is how you use it, right? So you frame it contextually and make it relevant to them. And then let the user experience the aha moment as fast as possible. Again, and I tried to, by the way, when you look at all the items that I'm highlighting here, I'm trying to keep them under 7 items, because people, when we think about kind of the memory and the immediate buffer that we keep at any given moment, it's really hard to keep anything more than 7 points. Mine normally is even 5, like shorter. So even with this list, it's not going to be more than 7 points because I really want to make sure that we chunk up what we're talking about today. So present information in discrete chunks, right? Chunk it up into atoms, make it contextual. Keep them focused on one thing at a time, an immediate next step, and then prioritize features that correlate to increased retention in the first 3 days. Hold back the rest. So I want to pay attention to that third point for a second. When apps are complicated, or where there's a lot to learn, we are forced as UX designers, as UI designers, to prioritize. And we are forced to say, okay, this is more of a pro users feature, or this is something that they might use when they are on this app for longer than an hour, right? And so if that's the case, we can hold back that part of the onboarding and really deliver it the second time you open the app, or after they are done with the main onboarding, or when they start a particular feature. So there are a lot of different ways to chunk it up. And I would say retention, anything that would help people understand the app and be able to come back to it and use it in their daily life, is the top priority. I'm not seeing my slide change. Okay, finally, it changed. Great. So the literacy spectrum is a really important thing to pay attention to. As designers, we know that we're not designing for ourselves. We're not designing for our team. We're designing for a full spectrum of people. And apart from being novice to something or proficient in something, people also might have different ways that they understand information. And abstraction is a really interesting thing because on one end, metaphors are a really great way to explain something. But at the same time, many users struggle with abstraction. So I would say this is where user testing comes into play very heavily. If you have a few concepts, a few hypotheses, test them early, test them quickly, and then just see, how much abstraction is good for the user. In terms of the literacy, there are a few other aspects in play here that we'll always need to keep in mind. People are afraid to break things. They're afraid that there's going to be no undo, that there is going to be no way of going back. So we need to always frame something as like, it's okay to try. This is not final. This is something that you're just testing out. So copywriting is really, really important. From the UX standpoint, of course, allowing for easy undos, easy go back to previous step, easy skip is really, really important to really make people feel no fear, to feel like they're, that all the mistakes are forgiven. And last but not least, we need to always build upon the familiar. So we need to think if these users are coming from a mobile app, like in the case of Google Maps, right? A lot of people are using Google Maps on their phone. What can we borrow from a very, very familiar interface of your phone and bring it to the XR space? So people can always anchor their experiences and anchor what they're doing upon the familiar things, and they feel more comfortable that way. And then once users learn, get them to apply it right away, right? That is what we were talking about, the relevancy, the contextual aspect of it all. Why am I learning this? And once I've learned it, let me try it right away. So context of use is key. Users learn best one thing at a time. I said it like 5 times and I'll say it again, especially if it maps to their time, curiosity, and what they're solving for. And also creating mental models and always thinking about which mental models we're creating. We need to be very, very aware of that as designers and understand how is the product perceived? What is the product perceived as a tool for? Last but not least, metrics. I know this was a lot. We'll get to discuss it in a second. We're trying to get a lot of insights really, really condensed here. But metrics is a really, really important thing to think about ahead of time. If you're working on an app that's already out in the world, take a look at your metrics, identify one action that users keep coming back for, right? And place metrics around that, or like build your onboarding around that. If you're not there yet, if you're designing an app that's not out in the world yet, take your time to build a hypothesis around the core action and value of your product to set up the right metrics and build onboarding around. I know this was a lot. I think what would be really, really helpful is to put all of this together on a very, very concrete example and discuss how this all works based on this. So as I mentioned, I'm working on Google Maps right now. The product is not released yet. It's going to be released with the headset. But we have a really, really strong app that we're based off of, and that is Google Earth. If you ever try Google Earth VR, give me a shout out. I would love to discuss that. But I would love to show the onboarding for Google Earth. And it's a little bit of a lengthy onboarding. We do have sound there, but I don't think we have sound on Riverside today, unfortunately. But it's really, really beautiful upbeat music, and the soundscape is a really important thing to pay attention to when you're designing onboarding, especially in terms of feedback. When you did something correctly, when you want to signal to people that they're moving to the next stage. But for now, I'm just going to show you a video without sound. So this is a video of Google Earth, how it used to be a few years ago. So this is a few years back, and of course, this is no hand tracking, this is controllers only. But I think this is a really great example of an XR onboarding that works across many different modalities in many different ways and educates the user and rewards the user for doing that. So when we're starting, there's a really beautiful sunrise. And you get you saw those tooltips that showcase how you should be using your controllers. And then it takes you to different places on Earth and lets you kind of tour the world as you're learning the main UI. So right now you see that you're in Tokyo, that you see that you're in the welcome tour, how long you've already been there, how much is left. I think it's a really great idea, specifically for an app like this, to showcase the full capabilities. You know, somebody might be in a very rural location and they might be only interested in seeing what's around them. So you want to expand the world a little bit and show the possibilities. And this is what the onboarding that takes you to different places and shows you on this little globe at the bottom is designed for, right? So it both shows all the value of the app. And in a second, we're going to see how you can learn the UI as well. I hope nobody's feeling motion sickness. I know XR recordings are always a little bit tricky. But yeah, let's just wait a few more seconds until we get to the UI onboarding. Once we're finished with the tour, now you can see the beautiful Earth from afar. And we're going to see a few things from the UI onboarding as well. Okay, so we're getting the headline, learn how to explore. So it tells you step 1 out of 7. And we're teaching you, first up, how to drag the Earth. Now, how to fly towards the Earth, right? So like the most immediate things, you probably want to zoom in. So those are the first things that we're going to teach you how to do, right? We showed you it close up, and now we're showing you how to use it when you're starting from afar. So you can see there's a planet mode and there's an aerial mode. And in order to prevent motion sickness, when you're placing something ahead of you, we're telling the user that you're actually the one who is initiating the ground going down. There's some featured pre-selected locations so that people don't need to like kind of think like, oh, where do I need to go? How do I learn? We're actually taking you to really great, beautiful pre-selected locations. And we're also showing, this is one of my favorite features, that you can actually change the time of day by dragging the sun in the sky. That my mind was blown the first time I saw that. And then finally, the 7th step is to save the place. And they're showing exactly how this corresponds to a button on your controller, where it's getting saved, which location exactly is getting saved, and that the tutorial is complete. So yes, 7 steps is the maximum amount that we can possibly do, but it seemed pretty effortless. It seemed pretty fast. It seemed pretty painless. And the whole time when you're doing it, you're engaged. You're in the sense of, oh, you're understanding exactly why you were doing this, which is very, very exciting. We're almost about to switch to Q&A, but last thing I wanted to tease out, another project I cannot talk a lot about, but I'm currently also engaged on a remaster of Bjork's visual album Volnicura for Apple Vision Pro and Quest, and of course Google products. And we're rethinking the onboarding there as well. So I just wanted to give a quick teaser of the app and kind of like set up the stage that even for something as artistic, so Google Earth was really utilitarian, this is a very artistic project. This is a visual album. This is a location scanned in Iceland. This is many different videos directed by 7 different directors. They're contextually were done for a Bjork digital exhibition for the museums like MoMA all around the world, and then assembled in a VR app afterwards. So there's a lot of really interesting UI. There's a lot of really interesting setup for experiences. But this will be the case where onboarding is very, very minimal, and it's kind of steps back to really let art shine. This is inside of her mouth, which is really, really funny. But yeah, Bjork is a genius. I'm very honored to be working on a project with her. And hopefully, maybe when we're done with it, I can come back and talk a little bit more about that UI. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna try to stop sharing. I'm here. I just needed to restart the studio, and I'm gonna rejoin. There we go. Great. Let's open the floor to questions, answers, and discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liya. That was so cool. Really love to see the kind of cross-pollination between your like background in so many different areas in tech. Seeing like a financial chart in a healthcare app was really, really fun. Really enjoyed that. And the breakdown of Google Earth's onboarding was really sick. I know that app holds like a special place in a lot of people's hearts, and I know lots of people still use it as like the app to first show people like what XR is. So I'm super excited for like its successor to exist in the world, whenever that is.
Yeah. Did you hear me okay, guys? Was it not too much noise in the background? Okay, perfect. I just have tons
Yay.
of hundreds of people walking in front of me.
No, it surprisingly went really well for
Great.
for coming live from South by Southwest.
Cool.
Really. So we have one question already
Mhm.
from someone by the handle of Flow Up Design, who says, as designers, how much of this falls under interactive experience design, and how much of it is specific to UI implementation?
I think it's hard to divide. It's like all just so merged. I think even UX and UI is super, like, you have to be a Swiss knife. There's no other way around it. There's no clear boundaries. I would say when I started in the field of UX, which was over 10 years ago, there was a little bit of a clearer division, like, oh, you're doing wireframes, and then you're working with somebody who's doing design, and then you're working with somebody who implements it. It was like very, very clear cut 10 years ago. But now I would say just lean into your strengths and curiosities. So as a UX designer, you need to be a strategist. You need to have experience in user testing, and you need to understand user research. You need to understand how you lay everything out in a way that benefits the user. But then you also start designing the screen. So for instance, at Google, when you are a UX designer, you are actually designing approximately 50 to 80% of visual as well, so UI as well. And then you have a visual design team to come in and bring that 10%, 15, 20% of the final polish, right? But I would say I do a lot of UI still, a lot of it, right? And then in terms of the interaction, again, lean into your strength, curiosities. If you can do animation, if you can do interactive prototypes, that's great. If you can work in Unity, that's great. If you can work in Blender, that's great. If you can use Shapes, XR, Spline, these are all really great tools to use, but you don't have to. At least you need to know how to partner with prototypers, with engineers, with people who can build it for you and effectively communicate your thought, and also always be thinking about how the user is going to be using it. It's not static screens. It's not two-dimensional. It's three-dimensional. We have motion sickness to think about. We have to think about, like, what if somebody tapped them on the shoulder? We need to think about pass-through versus full immersion. There are so many things to think through, but it really comes naturally. The more you think about it, the more you test early, the more you iterate, the more naturally it comes to you. So none of these things are something that I'm proactively, like, oh, I need to think about that. It just, over time, you just know that you need to think about it. And yeah, I hope this answers the question. Not a clear cut division anymore.
One thing I was really interested in is, do you have any anecdotes around bad onboarding that you've seen in XR, or something that like maybe you thought, oh man, they could have done the onboarding so much better here. I know I've designed bad onboarding in the past myself, and had to remedy that.
Yeah, I would not use the word bad, because the reason I'm saying that I would not yet use it, I would reserve the word bad for areas where there are really clear best practices. Like, you can have bad onboarding for a mobile app because mobile apps have been around so long. You know exactly what a good onboarding feels like. You know exactly when somebody violates best practices. For XR, it's different because it's such a new field in a way, or like it's such a fast evolving field. I see apps with almost no onboarding, which is frustrating, right? It's just like not designed. And then I see apps that have too much onboarding. For instance, Shapes XR is a really, really good tool. It's a great tool, but learning it is hard. You feel like it's so much UI. The way that they teach you is just overwhelming. And they're very smart people. I would not call this bad onboarding, but I would say it's an overwhelming onboarding. I would say this is onboarding that needs to be iterated on, that needs to be simplified, that needs to, like, I have a hard time using Shapes XR because it feels just too much. So that's an example, and with all the respect to people who build it, it's not easy to design good onboarding. And I just think it's an iterative thing. You just need to keep improving it and keep improving it. So I would say Shapes XR has an MVP version of the onboarding right now. It works, but it's a little bit of a struggle to get into.
I know that team are like actively working on it, because I a couple years ago I picked up ShakesXR and basically spent an entire afternoon like watching videos and like going through it and trying to work it out. But I know this year they shipped like the beginnings of some interactive onboarding for it, and hopefully they'll improve that.
Yeah.
I had an app I sent to CES that literally just had like tooltips that appeared, and yeah, that was the wrong decision for onboarding.
Yeah.
It was like super new hand tracking interactions that needed like super clear cut, like space and time for people to like breathe in and take it in.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
eventually nailed it, but takes that iteration, right?
You're really great, so I'm sure you nailed it. But like even just what you're saying, the way that XR field has changed in the recent years, like you used to only have to think about controllers and how do you teach people specific buttons on controllers. And now you have to think about hand tracking and how hand tracking works on Apple versus how it works on Quest versus how it will work on, the Google. And like, it's just a lot, right? So I think we always need to move towards simplification, move towards establishing the best practices, just because, every device has their own best practices right now. And this is not ideal for the user.
Yeah, definitely not. So we had a couple more questions coming in the chat that I've been neglecting. So we had, if you're working on a more complicated application, how would you recommend to break down onboarding? Break down into multiple onboarding chunks, something else?
Yeah, I touched upon it a little bit in my principles, but basically, when you think about how people use your app, you need to think like, what are the most immediate needs, the things that they need to do right off the bat. With Google Earth, we just see like we need to zoom in, pan around, rotate immediately. Like if there are more advanced features, we can teach them later, but they're kind of the basics. It's almost like the Maslow pyramid of needs for the user, right? We need the food and shelter first, and then we need kind of like self-actualization next. So I would say apply the Maslow pyramid of needs to onboarding chunking and onboarding prioritization, and you cannot go wrong there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess so. Another question we had was, how do you think about building business need into the app, into like a 3D application in XR? And how do you kind of, I'm not 100% sure I get that question, but maybe you do.
Yeah, I think, and I mentioned that, like, as a UX designer, you always think about business needs. You are kind of a mediator. If we think about, law, in courtroom or whatever, like a mediator, somebody who has interests of both parties in front of them, right? And their goal is to hope that people can get to a resolution without actually going to court, like settling. So in a way, a UX designer is a mediator. You have the interests of business on one hand, and you have the interests of the user on the other hand. Like business needs to sell products. Business needs retention. Business needs subscription. Business needs all these things. User does not want to pay, does not want to subscribe, does not want to come back, but they have problems they want to solve, right? And so you kind of mediate at all times. So you always think about business needs and you always think about user values and try to make it as effortless as possible. And that's, I think, that one of the hardest parts of the job.
Good. Okay, so we have another question here. How much pre-existing knowledge do you expect people to have in XR? Do you expect them to at least the basics, know the basics, I'm assuming?
Yeah, and so what is interesting is normally all the headsets have the unboxing experience. So if you buy a headset, you have already gone through the onboarding for the operating system, which is a whole other beast to design. That's a whole other thing of itself, how to onboard the users to the operating system, which I did not work on the onboarding for the operating system. I specifically worked on the onboarding for apps. But it's really good to know like what they have already learned when they were onboarding to the system, and you build on top of that. So in a way, again, if we return to the Maslow's pyramid of needs, like your very foundation is covered by them initially learning how to use the headset, and then you're building on top of that. It becomes trickier when an owner of the headset lends their headset to somebody else who has never used it before. And so in a way, it was like when I say like I own, a Quest. You've never used Quest. I'm going to borrow, like, I'm going to give my Quest for you to use. So first, I need to show you how to use the Quest, and that kind of falls on me as somebody who gives it to you. And then the app picks up from there, right? So I almost forgot the question I was answering. What was the question?
I think
How much?
how much pre-existing knowledge do you expect people to have in XR?
Yeah.
I'm assuming not from a design perspective, but from a user like adoption perspective.
Yeah, almost none. But the way you do, you assume that users cannot do anything, but if they can, you give them an easy way to skip to the part that would be new to them and give them a reason. So for instance, if somebody used EarthVR before, but they're going to be onboarding to MapsXR, we can say, like, here are the things that we're going to teach you. You can skip them, but you're also going to skip a really cool new tour that you haven't seen before. So maybe, give them a reason to stick around.
Cool. So, I mean, how much we're going until 12:30? We have another 15 minutes, or because I want to open up a bunch of different boxes and create some interesting discussion. But I don't. I know I was at South by South last year, so I know it's very stressful and chaotic. So.
But let's assume 10 minutes, and I'll try to go like rapid fire or as deep as you would like, whatever you prefer.
Okay, I always love talking to you because I like getting in it with you. So right now, like,
Thank
I
you.
feel that, like, so next week, Pip and I are going to be talking online about the state of the XR industry, right? And it seems now, like, you talked about briefly about Shapes XR, their onboarding and all that stuff. And I think that one of the things is kind of concerning, but it's gonna evolve over time. And what you're weighing right now is taking existing content and trying to bring it into a new medium. But right now, the medium itself is, I would say, in a medically induced coma. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with the medically induced coma. It's done strategically. It's not dead. It's not on life support. We put it to sleep a little bit because, as we've talked about briefly in other conversations, technologically, like from a supply chain and from a compute power perspective, it's really difficult to bring down the cost, make it ergonomical. But I think one of the things that kind of does do a lot of disservice in XR is that I don't think that anyone has, at least any major player has utilized the medium in a way that brings forth the value proposition of the product. And I think it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? Like, you can't just reinvent the wheel out of nowhere. You need the ability to create a system that people can scale upon and build into versus just kick down the door and do something new. But like with Shapes XR especially, like, it seems like there's so many fundamentals of just inputs and things that just don't exist right now. Like, what do you think are going to be the struggles and like that we're going to have to get over for XR to be a viable medium?
So many, honestly. I would say, on the positive note, the fact that AI is now being embedded into XR is one of the biggest, like, this is what positioned Google's headset and Google announcement ahead of everyone, is because nobody has really implemented AI to an extent that becomes so helpful, right? You can just say, like, hey, open this app, do this for me. Like, it listens to you. It can instinctively understand it. You can operate the whole OS with just your voice, which is fantastic. You can accomplish so many stuff. I wouldn't even say that it is in a medically induced coma. We just had a huge breakthrough with implementing AI into it. It is expensive. It is so expensive now to run AI on the background all the time, constantly listening, constantly processing, constantly screenshotting, constantly, understanding what you're staring at in order to always be helpful. So the size of devices, the cost of processing, like, all of these things are, I would say, biggest obstacles. But what we really need is a true daily utility that is universal. It's not just for XR space. It's universal for any innovative aspect. When smart watches were first released, nobody knew what would be the hero use case for them. So they were released with every single app out there. It's like you throw so much at the wall and you see what sticks. At the end of the day, when I go to the gym, 90% of the people wear smart watches in the gym. Like, I could have never expected that. There you go. I could have never expected that 10 years ago, And fitness is the hero use case for it. we need to figure out the hero use case for XR. Something like with AI, we can see ChatGPT became so prominent so fast because it helped people save time, save money, right? It brought convenience forward. So we need to figure out a use case for people that would be worth for them to, you know, get over the hurdle of what happened. Oh, I'm still here. My computer just decided to fall asleep immediately. One second, I need to enter my password. So funny.
Nice.
Of course, I made a typo. Yeah. Okay, I see myself again. Good thing it kept streaming, even though it fell asleep. Anyway, so we need a hero use case that would save people time, save people money, make something more convenient, supercharge something that already exists. I always bring up the idea of QR codes. QR codes have been around since 1994. They were invented in Japan. QR codes were just a weird thing that only a few used, if you really get it. Now we get COVID, and now we can't touch things, and suddenly QR codes are everywhere, and everybody's QR literate, right? And so sometimes it's a black swan event that you cannot predict that might happen. Sometimes it's just like, things are lighter. Maybe, like I would say, if we can solve navigation inside of the cars by overlaying your directions on top of what you're seeing, that would be a huge use case for AR in cars. We just need to implement it, solve it. Like, we don't need phone holders anymore. Your directions are in front of you on the windshield, but in a way that's safe, in a way that doesn't distract. Maybe we will never get there because cars will drive themselves before we even need to see the direction. So these are a lot of like really philosophical questions, but I think they're important ones to solve. And you know what? Being in this industry before it's massively adopted is really rewarding. It's really rewarding. So in a way, I'm like, oh yes, you guys switched your Discord to more general design, but there is benefit of staying niche as well.
There is. I think that at the moment, what interests, XR has, it's such a broad term, right? So, but if we're talking about the AR VR space, I think that there's a lot of exciting stuff, and I do believe that you're right, that AI is the key to a lot of this space, and I think it's going to be probably the early ground. XR is going to be the early ground where we're going to be able to see AI really take its legs, and I think AI being able to dynamically create UI for people is probably going to be the most important part of XR, and is probably going to move up the medium. And I don't think we're going to see that on mobile devices anytime soon, mainly because of like the constraints of business needs, like their monetization, as well as a lot of these operating systems are held together with bubble gum and tape to a certain extent. You can't really do much, especially when it comes to the security stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that XR is incredibly important, and that's why. But I also think AI is even more important when it comes down to the health of XR, and so that's why I think Google is probably in a better position, and they've positioned themselves with an open source structure, especially for their operating system. That is super important, but it's also interesting that they are building their system in a way that's going against the realm of both Meta and Apple in a way that feels the way it should be. But I do think that from like, how do we measure success, right? Because are we measuring off of mass consumer success and adoption? Are we doing it like off of sales numbers?
I have an anecdote for you that will answer that question, if I may. So I live in Hawaii, which I didn't mention yet. It's very, very warm. And in Hawaii, you don't always need a car. Sometimes you can just drive around on a scooter, which I do very often. So here's the anecdote. I got the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, which don't have an AR overlay. They're mostly kind of voice commands. They can take photos, take videos. And I got them just to try out for a month. I personally do not align with Meta's values. So I returned them in a month. I was like, let me try them, but I don't want to associate. I don't stand behind what Zuckerberg stands behind. Like, I just don't agree with a lot of things. I'm not going to use the product. I miss the product. I miss it because, like, first of all, I was wearing, like, it solved two things. Like, normally when you put your headphones in, you need to, like, pair them or whatever. Like, I just put on glasses, headphones, immediately turn on. So what I did, I would sit on my scooter, put on my glasses, they're on immediately. I'm like, hey, Meta, play Sabrina Carpenter. Next song, Play Sabrina Carpenter this. Okay, take a photo, take a video. Hey, what is this I'm seeing? Can you take a picture of this? Can you translate it? All hands free while I'm like, both of my hands are driving. It was so convenient. And the fact that they were just like, the moment you put them on, they paired. You don't need anything else. The charge stayed on for days. I returned them. I miss them. Like, I'm still like struggling using normal headphones right now because that was so convenient. And I could drive the scooter like 30 miles an hour. The noise canceling was amazing. Like, nobody heard the wind blow left and right. I could like have a full-on phone conversation while like zapping down the street. So this was an example of a use case where so much convenience and value was brought to me by the voice control interface that I built a habit within 30 days. And that's what we need for XR. And that, like, sometimes you don't know what combinations of factors will bring it in. It's a combination of voice input, overlay, ability to take photos, record videos, play music, take phone calls. What is the combination of features that will become so sticky that it will build a habit within a week? And people will be just like, I will do anything to have it. So that is a really, really interesting question. I know that the next few years are going to be the years of wearables and glasses once somebody cracks them. And Google is also working on that. I'm very, very excited. So we'll see.
Well, this was a fun conversation. We have a minute left. I appreciate you joining us and talking about your experiences. I'm super excited. I guess they didn't put a release date on the headset yet, right?
No, but it's this year.
Okay, it's this year. So that's very exciting. Cool. Well, I would love to chat with you more, but you're a busy gal. I appreciate it. Have fun at South by Southwest. It is
Thank
chaos.
you. Thank you. Yeah, I would encourage, I'll drop you a few links. I would encourage anybody who's interested in connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have an innovation newsletter, which acts as like literally a place for me to nerd out on everything. Like it's like every single innovation subject, philosophically and practically. So I would love for everybody to sign up. And I'm always open to chatting, and hopefully I'll come back and when things are released, that's one of my favorite, when I finally get to like nerd out and say everything. Hate NDAs.
I hear ya.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. I would love to connect. Yeah, it's an exciting time, very fast growing time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liya.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
All right.
Yes, I'm still here. I just turned off the video.
There you go.
Sweet.
All right. Should I join the Discord community? How do I see the comments, the questions? I kind of really wanted to see some live reactions.
Oh, so we were on YouTube.